We celebrate Sri Krishna Janmashtami in the year 2020 as we await His Holiness Romapada Swami Maharaj to join us for the class that he's going to give. Wanted to share with you, after Maharaj's class, our online festivities will continue where we will have live kirtan in the temple, and you will be able to see the deities throughout the night until after midnight arati is completed. So stay tuned, share the information, share the online opulence, if you will, with your friends and family if they're not watching. Many of your friends and family in India may be celebrating Janmashtami tomorrow. There's been a lot of date-related confusion. A lot of people in the US are celebrating today because that's when Janmashtami is. However, many relatives and friends in India may be saying that it's actually on Wednesday. But today is the actual day of Janmashtami. So as we wait for Maharaj to join us through the Zoom session, wanted to say a few words about His Holiness Romapada Swami Maharaj. Romapada Swami Maharaj has been a long-term visiting sannyasi that comes to our temple often. Maharaj conducts his annual Japa retreat, which, as many of you know that were signed up to attend his Japa retreat this year, the lockdown began 3 days prior to Maharaj's Japa retreat. And Maharaj stayed back in Houston, and he held wonderful classes in the evening at various devotees' homes. So we're very grateful for Maharaj to have spent so much time as all of us were trying to figure out what this lockdown and quarantine is all about. And as we discussed earlier, I am hoping and praying, and I want each and every one of you to do the same thing, that we pray to Lord Krishna that next year for sure, for Janmashtami, we will have the biggest ever festival here at ISKCON of Houston, and all of you are already invited to come join us next year, 2021. 2020, as they say in the eyesight issue, is supposed to be the perfect sight. And I think the dictionary and some of the terminology may change after 2020 is done. However, we are very fortunate and we are very grateful to His Holiness Romapada Swami Maharaj to have spent his time to share the wisdom about Lord Krishna Janmashtami. So at this time, His Holiness Romapada Swami Maharaj will speak.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschachati Satarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Krishna Janmashtami ki jai. A little different way to celebrate Krishna Janmashtami than what I've been used to for the past 50 years, living as a Hare Krishna devotee, but it's a way to celebrate the appearance of Krishna. I selected 8 verses from Srimad Bhagavatam that, as far as I know, they're the only 8 verses in a row that are repeated twice in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, there's a very important verse. It comes right at the very middle of the 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, at the end of chapter 9. And again, just before the celebrated essence of Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharmam Prityaja, Mamekam Sharanam, that same verse, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. The conclusion portion of that sloka is slightly different, chapter 9 and chapter 18, but it's the only verse that's repeated twice, which tells us that it's important. That verse is a very important verse in understanding the whole of Bhagavad Gita. And in the Bhagavatam, these 8 verses are spoken by Gargamuni at the Nama Karana ceremony that was arranged by Nanda when he went to pay his taxes in Mathura. According to Vedic culture, the name-giving ceremony is to be performed before the end of the 40th day of the birth of the child. And both Krishna and Balaram were with Nanda Maharaj at that time. When he went to pay his taxes, we hear from Bhagavatam that his dear friend and relative Vasudeva, who had sent his wife Rohini to be in the care of his good friend and relative Nanda, knew that Nanda Maharaj was in Mathura to pay his taxes. But Vasudeva also knew of the atrocious spirit of Kamsa. So he was very carefully avoiding having a conversation with Nanda so that Kamsa would not know of their relation and their affection for one another. So Vasudeva made an arrangement through a messenger to meet Nanda in a private place, and naturally they exchanged affectionate messages with one another. And one of the important messages that Vasudeva wanted to share with Nanda was he had better be very careful because of danger for his newborn son, who hasn't been named yet. And he knew, because he knew that son was his son, and he knew the nature of Kamsa because Kamsa had already killed 6 of his children. And the 8th child of Vasudeva was the one that was prophesied to kill Kamsa. So he was being very circumspect, but at the same time passing on this caution message. Now, what would you think if you were Nanda Maharaj, your dear friend Vasudeva, very wise, very learned, very proper, said you better watch out for dangers. You would have some anxiety, right? So Nanda had some anxiety. He was very much concerned about Krishna's welfare. And we'll speak about that particular point again. Chinta is the Sanskrit word for what he was feeling, transcendental anxiety. Then Nanda had a conversation with Gargamuni to perform the name-giving ceremony. Gargamuni was very thoughtful and prudent and said, best if we have this in a private place so Kamsa doesn't get on the alert for what we're doing. So it was held in a Gosha, very appropriate place for Krishna and Balaram to have their name-giving ceremony performed. when Nanda began, there's one verse where he gives 3 names first to Balaram. He's the elder brother. He addresses Balaram as the son of Rohini, which was understood. He was the son of Rohini, although Gargamuni also knew that he was simultaneously the son of Vasudeva, the 7th child. And after giving these names Rama, because he would give great pleasure to all the relatives in that family in Braja, and the name Bala, because he would have incredible bodily strength, and a 3rd name given was Sankarshana, because he would unite these 2 families. That's the family that was residing, the Vishnu dynasty, Yadu dynasty clan, living within Mathura, or previously living in Mathura. Many of them left when Kamsa took over. And the family related in Braja under Nanda's care. Sankarshan was the 3rd name. And then these 8 verses were spoken by Gargamuni to give the identity of Krishna. Now, because we're observing Krishna Janmashtami, we're not astrologers. We're not Gargamuni. We're worshippers of Krishna, and we can learn a lot about Krishna's Janma, Karma, Chame Divyam, Evam Yoveti Tattvataha, by hearing about Gargamuni. And he understood everything about Krishna because he was so amazingly qualified. And he presented details about Krishna's life that would come to pass exactly. So that the starting point of Gargamuni's 8 verses was expressing something that's a very important verse for all of us who are worshippers of Lord Chaitanya. Without saying that Krishna is a Yuga avatar, he identified your son in previous millennia has appeared in a red, white, and yellow form. And now he's appearing in this blackish form. Now these colors are the colors of the Yuga avatars. And we don't know so much. Research and you'll find there's not so much described about the other yugas other than the color. In Satya Yuga, the Yuga avatar is white in complexion, with luster. And in Tattva Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami identifies who are those. He gives 2 names and then says others. Hamsa avatar and Vaikuntha avatar and others in Satya Yuga. In Treta Yuga, the complexion of the Yuga avatar is reddish, and Jiva Goswami in Tattva Sandarbha says that Yajna avatar and Vishnu avatar and others are the Treta Yuga avatar. And of course, this was Dwarka Yuga. Krishna's form was blackish, and that leaves just one more yuga, our present Kali Yuga. And the color assigned for that Kali Yuga is yellowish in color. This is an important verse for the followers of Lord Chaitanya because it's one of those verses that, without naming the name, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, it gives the indication of his position as the Yoga avatar in Kali Yuga. It's a detail, but in chapter 8, which Srila Prabhupada made the translation and commentary for, he adds that in some of the Dwapara Yugas, the Yoga avatar is green, like fresh grass, and even gives the name Ramachandra, without giving any explanation of why that is being said. And the same idea is confirmed, same understanding is confirmed by Jiva Goswami in his Nagu Bhagavatamrita, that is to say, in some of the Dwapara Yugas, the Yoga avatar is green in complexion. Again, he doesn't give details. But the important teaching for followers of Lord Chaitanya is Lord Chaitanya, the Kali Yuga avatar, matches Garga Muni's words in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 8. And the same set of verses are described again in Chapter 26. I'll describe that a little bit. We know that there are three primary reasons for Krishna's appearance. I've celebrated every Krishna Janmashtami, we have to say it. Pritranaya, sadhana, first reason. Vinashaya chadushkatam, second reason. Dharma samstha, anarthaya. He restores, reestablishes principles of Dharma. And every form of the Lord does those three things. And there's a fourth principle that's described by Jiva Goswami in Bhagavad Sandarbha. And without all the detail, he says those first three, those are external or secondary reasons. And the primary or internal reason for the Lord's appearance is to display his wonderful, sweet pastimes, to delight the hearts of the residents of Vrindavan, and to attract the hearts and the minds of all of us who aren't in pure consciousness, but to attract our hearts and minds back to that forgotten relationship with Krishna as our eternal Father and the most lovable object we can find. So that's discussed in a later verse in these 8 verses of Garga Muni. But the context of saying it again, it's Nanda repeating it to the residents of Vrindavan in chapter 26, where several chapters describing the Govardhan Leela and the subduing of the pride of Indra, and Surabhi offering Abhishek and forming Govinda Kund and naming him Govinda. And all of that takes place. Airavata performing Abhishek with his celestial waters. And the pastime is concluded. Krishna has placed the hill of Govardhan back in its place, and everybody goes back to their daily duties in Braja. Except a number of the elders, cowherd men, with parental affection for Krishna, begin a discussion about, wait a minute, who is he? Because when the pastime was going on, they were just so absorbed in bliss, being with Krishna exactly according to their different rasa, and Krishna reciprocating loving exchanges with them exactly to match their hearts. They were overwhelmed in ecstatic feelings of love for Krishna. But the day after, Another ecstasy took place, and that's the ecstasy of astonishment, which is one of the secondary rasas, and their whole chapter called Wonderful Krishna is a recounting, like we find in Ramayana. There's a retelling of Ram's pastimes so many times within Ramayana. Just little short sayings, verse by verse, of Krishna's subduing or killing demons, one after the next, and how powerful is this little boy? And not only he's so powerful, but we can't stop thinking of him with loving affection. And he can't stop thinking of us with loving affection. So they go to Nanda Maharaj and say, who is he? What's your understanding? You're our chief. You're our king. And we have all regard and respect for you. He's your child. You must have some thoughts. Please disclose to us. And so Nanda gives the same 8 verses that he heard from Gargamuni. And the Sanskrit is almost verbatim, 8 verses in a row, declaring once again. And as we read, this pastime of Govardhana Hill took place 7 years after the name-giving ceremony, 7 plus, because Krishna is already in his 7th year. So all that in between time, from the birth to his 7th year, when he lifted Govardhana Hill, the residents of Vrindavan were very familiar because of their love for Krishna. They were very familiar with Gargamuni's words to Nanda. He didn't keep it a secret. He shared with them. And they had the same understanding. And again and again and again, they refer to this understanding. So they understood what Gargamuni said. Still, when Krishna exhibits his divine opulences, it's for a purpose. It's for stimulating this secondary rasa of astonishment that stimulates their primary rasa in a very special way. Secondary rasas have a way of eclipsing the primary rasa for a little while, just like the tide coming in and covering the land, and then the tide recedes. Secondary rasas are like that. The primary rasa is primary. It's always primary. The secondary rasa seems momentarily to supersede the primary rasa. It takes over the emotion of those devotees of Krishna. So the pastimes may exhibit that special feature. Now, Gargamuni is very qualified. He knows who Krishna is. He also knows the mood of Nanda Maharaj is he doesn't see him as the personality of Godhead. He sees him as his beloved son. And he's very careful not to disturb the mind and the devotional mood of Nanda. So he doesn't say he's the Yoga Avatar. He doesn't say he's not the Yoga Avatar. He just speaks of your son in previous millennia. He had these different colors, and now he's blackish. And the next verse, Nanda Maharaj, Gargamuni says, there's 8. For many reasons, he doesn't give the reasons. For many reasons, this beautiful son of yours sometimes appeared previously as the son of Vasudeva. He doesn't say, like 40 days ago, he was the son of Vasudeva. It's plural. Sometimes this son of yours appeared as the son of Vasudeva. This means how we to understand is just as in Krishna Loka, Krishna is eternally there, Nanda and Jasoda are eternally there in Braja, and Vasudeva and Devaki are eternally there in Mathura. And they have parental affection for Krishna. So when Krishna appears, Yada Yada Hi Dharma Shavlani, when Krishna appears from age to age, he appears as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. So he doesn't give the detail. He doesn't say he is the personality of God who appears as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki. He doesn't say that. He says, for many reasons, this beautiful son of yours sometimes appeared previously as the son of Vasudeva. Therefore, those who are learned sometimes call this child Vasudeva. So that name stuck. That's one of Krishna's names. Even while he was in Braja, Vasudeva. They knew had many different names. Gopal, Govinda. That name Govinda came when he was 7. But other names. Nanda, Yasoda, Nanda. But Vasudeva was one of the names given by Karana, and everybody knew. So that's the second of the 8 verses, giving us some understanding about Janma Karma Chame Divyam. The third of these 8 verses. For this son of yours, there are many forms and names according to his transcendental qualities and activities. These are known by me, but people in general do not understand them. He didn't spell it out, but he's letting him know. He knows, and he's saying it indirectly. He is the source of all avatars. He is avatari. Many different forms as his expansions in the spiritual realm, some of whom appear in the material realm as incarnations. Krishna is the source of all. Conclusively, Gargamuni is saying this in a very gentle and indirect way. Now, people in Vedic culture, they understood reincarnation, and one living entity may take many, many, many different births. So they weren't disturbed by hearing that he had many, many births, and he appeared in different ways during different periods of time. That's nicely described in the pastime of the residents, the elders of Vrindavan, wanting to see the spiritual world. The pastime comes when Nanda Maharaj was kidnapped by the agents of Varuna, thinking that he had violated a rule by taking his bath at the wrong time on the Dwadasi day to prepare for breaking the Dwadasi fast, the Ekadasi fast on the Dwadasi morning. So Varuna agent kidnapped him. Krishna came to the rescue, went to Varuna's abode, and requested Nanda to be returned. Varuna, his abode was opulent like anything. It was a heavenly abode. But not only that, Varuna worshipped Krishna right in front of Nanda Maharaj. So when they went back to Vrindavan, Nanda told everybody, you know what happened. Varuna's abode was like this. Wow, such opulence. And this opulent Varuna, one of the chief demigods amongst all the demigods, he worshipped my son. So he started wondering with astonishment, who is he? This would go on from time to time. And so they got into a mood, the residents, the elders. Maybe he's Narayan. And if he is Narayan, we have been taking birth and the cycle of birth and death, sometimes up to the heavenly realms, sometimes down to the lower regions, and here we are, cowherds. Maybe if he's Narayan, he'll show us his eternal abode. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And Krishna decided, knowing their hearts, let me show them. And so he showed them. He took them to the same place where Akura saw what he saw when leaving Vrindavan from Mathura. Same place. Brahma Radha, it's called, the lake of Brahma. He immersed them in the water. He lifted them out of the water and showed the spiritual world. Much to their amazement, they were in the spiritual world. And Krishna was with them, being worshipped by the personified Vedas, singing his praises. And then, covered by Yogamaya, they forgot everything. But the point is, in Vedic culture, people were very familiar with the idea of previous lifetimes, and Gargamuni saying in previous lifetimes this and that. So the residents of Braja, headed by Nanda, understood in that way. This son of yours, in previous lives, he was like this. And then he starts describing, in this life, he's going to have these characteristics, these qualities. He describes that sometimes in the past, the demons overcame the demigods. And this son of yours, very, very powerful son of yours, was able to protect them. And he doesn't say that he's Vishnu, but he says, demons cannot harm the demigods who always have Lord Vishnu on their side. He didn't say he's Lord Vishnu, but he protected the demigods. Your son protected the demigods from the hands of the demons. And then he says something very astonishing, very important too, because it pacified the heart of Nanda when again and again and again some opulence, some divinity was exhibited by Krishna in his wonderful pastimes. He understood what Gargamuni said. This child of yours is as good as Narayan. He didn't say he was Narayan. He didn't say he wasn't Narayan. He just said he's as good as Narayan. And not only that, he elaborated his transcendental qualities, his opulence, his name, his fame, and his influence. He is exactly like Narayan, which is true. Take the other way. Narayan is exactly like Krishna. One is the expansion of the other. He didn't say Krishna is the source of all expansions, including Narayan. He just says he's exactly like Narayan. And with that power that he has, he will protect you all. With that power that he has, he will protect you all. So take good care of him. And it's for that reason, when there was some danger for the residents of Vrindavan, they remembered these words of Gargamuni. He has powers like Narayan. He will protect the residents of Vrindavan. When Nanda Maharaj was being swallowed by the big serpent, wonderful pastime, the residents of Vrindavan were going to observe Shivratri. So they went to a Shiva temple northwest of Vrindavan to observe a 3-day Shivratri celebration. And it took a long time to get there. They did some rituals, and at the end of the day, they decided they would just take rest right on the ground. They're simple cowherd village people. So Nanda was given a special place. The cowherd men, they were given another place. And the boys were given another place. And it wasn't just the residents of Vrindavan. There were many, many, many people because it was Shivratri. It was a big festival. In the middle of the night, a giant, humongous serpent approached Nanda and began to swallow him. And when Nanda felt the serpent swallowing him, he approached his feet to get the mercy of Nanda Maharaj's feet. He became purified by contact with Nanda Maharaj's feet. Nanda called out, Krishna, Krishna, please protect me. This is Father, the king, asking protection from his little son because he remembered the words of Gargamuni. This son of yours will have power like Narayan. And when Krishna heard his name called, Krishna came quickly, but the boys were some distance away because they wanted to play and they didn't want any adults messing around with their play. It was too important for play. The cowherd men were closer. They came quickly. They had sticks and they were whacking the serpent. Yet some of the sticks were still from the fire, burning. They burned the body of the serpent. He didn't let go. Kept swallowing Nanda. So what did Krishna do? First, the serpent saw Krishna. Just by seeing Krishna, he became purified. Because he wasn't envious. There's others that would see Krishna, and like Putana saw Krishna, but she was envious. So she didn't become purified in the same way. But the serpent became purified, and then Krishna just once, not like he did with Kavya, just once, he touched the body of the serpent, and instantly that Vidyadhara was released from the curse of the sage who had cursed him to become a serpent on earth. But the point is, Nanda and all the others knew of Krishna's potencies. They considered him invested with potencies like Narayan. They didn't consider him. And so when he did something specifically, Garga said, don't be astonished when he performs wonderful activities. Nonetheless, when he performed wonderful activities, they were astonished because that's a secondary rasa. But then it was resolved by remembering Gargamuni's words. He's just invested with power. And those powers will protect all of you. The special power of Krishna is not just his Aishvarya feature, it's his Madhurya feature. I'm going to end with this very nice explanation that comes twice in the 10th canto, maybe more than twice, but two places. You can take note if you like to look up verses in the Bhagavatam. 10:11:58. 10:11:58 comes in chapter 11, which is the childhood pastimes of Krishna. And one of the childhood pastimes in Braja was the killing of the Baka demon. And when Krishna wanted to give mercy to Baka, why? Because his elder sister, Putana, received special favor from Krishna, and so he wanted to give special favor to Baka. So he entered into Baka's mouth to touch the body, inside the body of Baka, just like he did with Aga, who was another brother. And when he was in the beak of this huge Baka demon, the Balaram, the cowherd boys, fainted because they were so attached. Balaram is described as Bhagavan, which means he's omniscient and he's all powerful. But more important than his opulence is his deep love for Krishna as his brother and friend. He fainted. The Madhurya feature overwhelmed his own Aishwarya feature, and he fainted. And when Krishna escaped from the mouth of Baka by becoming so hot, like burning metal, Baka spit him out and then tried to capture Krishna in his beak. Balaram and the cowherd boys came to external consciousness when Krishna killed them. They all went back to Braj. They gathered the calves because they had scattered, and they went back singing songs about Krishna. So when they were singing their songs of the glories of Krishna, which they would do all day long anyways, the residents of the village heard them singing the song, and they said, "What happened today?" And they said, "What happened today?" And they were singing songs praising Krishna. And this verse 11, chapter text 58 says, "In this way, all the cowherd men, headed by Nanda Maharaj, enjoyed topics about the pastimes of Krishna and Balaram with great transcendental pleasure, and they could not even perceive material tribulation." Material tribulation is bhava, and perceiving material tribulation is bhava vedana. They couldn't perceive the tribulation of material existence. Although they had bodies, they had parental affection, and parents have feelings for their children, naturally so. But their anxiety about the safety of Krishna was a transcendental ecstasy. They were protected from perceiving material tribulation by the sweet pastimes of Krishna and the stimulation of ecstatic love that they would feel, even when feeling anxiety. Isn't it a contradiction, right? Anxiety is a negative emotion. We don't like those things. We go to somebody to help us get over our depression or stress or anxiety attacks and all those things. So the Brijvasis, that they have the pure form. It's called Chinta. Chinta is a Sanchari Bhav. And when Sanchari Bhavs, there is a temporary peaking of some emotion, a heightening of some emotion, Sanchari Bhav, is manifested in some bodily symptom. They're compared to a wave in the ocean of rasa, bhakti rasa, sindhu. There's waves, and one of those waves is Sanchari Bhav, and one of the waves of Sanchari Bhav type is anxiety. So they were feeling some anxiety. Oh, Krishna had to deal with Baka. How is he going to be safe? There was parental affection. But it's a transcendental anxiety that carried them on the other side of even perceiving material tribulation. In this way, they were protected. Isn't that a nice understanding? There's another verse that says the same thing, found in Brahma's prayers. It chapter 14, text 37. Write it down, you can check it later. 10:14:37. Brahma says to Krishna, "My dear master, although you have nothing to do with material existence, you come to this earth." This is Janma Karma Chine Divyam explained by Brahma. You come to this earth and imitate material life. Why? Just to expand the varieties of ecstatic enjoyment for your surrendered devotees. Just to expand the varieties of ecstatic enjoyment for your surrendered devotees. Ananda Sandoham, different varieties of transcendental ecstasies. That's the purpose of Krishna's appearance. And that's how Krishna protects his devotees from even perceiving material tribulation. They have spiritual tribulation. That's an ecstasy. Because it heightens their feelings of love for Krishna. It doesn't bring about forgetfulness of Krishna. It heightens their feelings of love for Krishna. That's an ecstasy. Whatever heightens your feelings of love for Krishna, whatever the color of the emotion is, it's ecstasy. Krishna is sometimes described as a Vaidurya Mani. Vaidurya Mani is a particular kind of gem that when you look at it, it appears to have different colors. At different times, it looks different, and different persons looking at it at the same time will see different colors. That's the nature of Vaidurya gem. And Krishna is like that. His transcendental pastimes, Divyam, Janma, Karma, Chame, Divyam. His transcendental activities are like that. Sometimes and sometimes. And so Sukadeva Goswami uses this phrase, kadachit, sometimes and sometimes. And Krishna's just enjoying. And his associates are enjoying with him sometimes and sometimes. All varieties, but it's all enjoyment. Even if it looks like tribulation, it's not material tribulation. It's ecstasy. It's a mystery to understand the transcendental nature, tattvataha, of Krishna. You need to understand the mysterious nature of Krishna. Now we can understand it at least through the assistance of his teachings and our acharyas explaining his teachings and his transcendental pastimes. To some extent we can understand. And the main thing is to become relieved of the material conception of life, become immersed in the spiritual conception of life, and be ready, eligible, in pure consciousness to receive Krishna appearing in our life. Not just notionally through teachings, but by practical experience. That's our observance of Krishna Janmashtami. So I'm looking at my watch, and I'm supposed to give another class in about 8 minutes. And so I'm going to take a little bit of time for some questions. So you can send some into the chat box or however you do this here. And I'll try to respond. Anyone online want to send in a question or can unmute yourself and raise a question? I'm all ears. Go ahead. I was asked that question by a 9-year-old girl, and my answer was, so that you become hungry. And then I explained. In the whole of the yoga process, any type of yoga, it requires preliminarily a spiritual conception. We're not this body. And to get to that spiritual conception, there needs to be control of the mind and senses. We'll see it the other way. If you don't have control of the mind and senses, you won't be able to enter into a spiritual conception of self. And based upon that spiritual conception of self, then you can go further in spiritual progress, spiritual activity. So to help control the mind and senses, fasting is helpful. Now, if someone's a small child, they may not be able to fast as an adult. But as adults, it's beneficial to not yield to the demands of the senses and the dictates of the mind, and instead engage the mind and the senses in those activities that are pleasing to Krishna. So on auspicious days, like the appearance days of the Lord, or the appearance days of great devotees, or on the Ekadasi days, or other auspicious days, fasting is helpful for controlling the senses. To control the senses consistently, there has to be some control of the mind. And so it purifies the mind and senses. It brings the mind and senses to a position where they're more calm, because one is not just demanding or yielding to the demands of the mind and senses. It's for purification, control of the mind and senses to help us enhance our spiritual conception of life, the spiritual purpose within that spiritual conception. I don't see there has to be a contradiction or conflict between the two. Judgmental is different than discernment. In Bhagavad Gita, we see that Krishna is discerning. Here's the three modes, here's the symptoms of each, here's how the three modes act in different aspects and fields and activities of life. So that's discernment. It's not judgment, it's discernment. And so judgmentalism is altogether different than you have values, you have perspective on what is important and standards of conduct to be followed by you and the world, according to Krishna's view. That's discernment. You accept the values that Krishna, or by your own thought process, concurring with Krishna, however you arrive there. And if somebody isn't doing what you're doing, then it's not judgment, it's just discernment. Here's this mode, here's that mode, here's this kind of behavior, falls under this category. It's discernment, it's not judgment. Judgment is, good and bad and right and wrong. And of course, I'm right. And others are wrong. Just ask me. That's judgment. anxiety due to fear of sickness. Is that what she said? Well, if you think that you're the body, and one of the conditions of the body is birth, death, disease, and old age, then you're going to be in fear all the time because it's one of the things that bodies do. Bodies get disease just as they get old, just as they die, and again take their birth. So anxiety about the realities of life can be counteracted by knowledge because that's ignorance. There's realities. And the best thing is not just know it's just part of, just shrug your shoulders and part of life, but the deeper course of action is how to get on the other side of these problems. Not just how to have a good physician ready when you get some disease and eat this way and exercise that way and so forth so you maintain good health. You're still going to get disease. So why? Is there some way to go beyond the cycle of birth and death, disease, and old age? That's when your intelligence is moving in that direction, you're much more equipped to handle disease, what to speak of fear of disease. Fear arises from the bodily conception. You become a prisoner in your own conception of life. So go to the spiritual conception and find a permanent solution. Sure. Even if someone's a mudha, they benefit from his pastimes. He's all good absolute. I'm not really expert at this topic. I just know that they commonly calculate their calendar based upon one of some place in India that they consider to be the headquarters of their practice. We don't calculate that way. We calculate according to our time zones. But there may be another explanation that I'm not so equipped to give. And I'm looking at the clock, and devotees in Houston, it's been a pleasure being with you, and I'm going to have to go to another city now. In 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai.